Dust settled over the folding tables on Maple Street, hiding a secret worth more than any price tag. When a desperate grandson traded a tarnished brass compass for 2 crumpled $20 bills, he thought he'd scored a quick profit. He didn't know he had just sold his family's salvation. Liam Mitchell dragged the back of his wrist across his sweating forehead, leaving a streak of attic grime across his pale skin. At 28 years old, Liam was drowning. His mailbox was stuffed with final notice envelopes. His car was one missed payment away from being repossessed, and a string of failed business ventures had left him entirely bankrupt. To make matters worse, his 79-year-old grandfather, Andre Patel, was currently sitting in a sterile room at St. Jude's Memorial Hospital, recovering from a mild ischemic stroke. The medical bills were piling up faster than Liam could comprehend, forming a suffocating mountain of debt that threatened to crush them both. Andre's old Victorian house on the outskirts of Peoria, Illinois, was a labyrinth of forgotten memories. It was a sprawling, creaking structure filled with decades of accumulated life. With Andre temporarily out of the house, Liam had made a desperate executive decision. He was going to hold a massive estate sale. He didn't have his grandfather's permission, but in Liam's panicked mind, he was doing the right thing. He was saving the house. He was saving them. The attic was stiflingly hot, the air thick with the smell of dry rot mothballs and old pine. Sunlight sliced through the single octagonal window, illuminating millions of dancing dust motes. Liam sneezed as he pried open the lid of a heavy olive-drab military footlocker tucked away in the darkest corner beneath the eaves. He knew his grandfather had served in the United States Army during the Vietnam War, specifically in the 1st Cavalry Division, but Andre was a man of stone when it came to his military past. He never attended reunions, never wore the hats, and never ever spoke of what happened in the Ia Drang Valley in the autumn of 1965. Inside the footlocker lay an assortment of folded wool blankets, a brittle leather belt, and a rusted canteen. Liam dug his hands past the musty fabric, his fingers brushing against something heavy and cold at the very bottom. He pulled it out into the shaft of sunlight. It was a thick, oversized brass navigational compass, but it looked incredibly strange. It was far heavier than any standard compass Liam had ever held, weighing nearly 3 pounds. The glass face was cracked, the needle inside frozen in place, pointing eternally slightly south of east. The brass casing was deeply tarnished, stained with dark, irregular patches that looked suspiciously like dried blood, though Liam convinced himself it was just rust. Etched into the back of the thick metal, barely legible beneath the grime, were the letters A.C. L-Zehe X-ray, November 65. Liam turned the heavy object over in his hands. It was ugly, broken, and completely useless. To a young man desperate for cash to keep the electricity from being shut off, it was just another piece of heavy junk taking up space. He tossed it carelessly into a cardboard box labeled Miscellaneous Antiques. Not noticing the dull metallic clink, it made a sound that suggested the compass was entirely hollow. By Saturday morning, the front lawn of the Patel residence was transformed into a sprawling flea market. Folding tables groaned under the weight of old dishware vinyl records and discarded power tools. Liam sat in a folding lawn chair, a metal cash box resting on his knees, watching neighborhood bargain hunters pick through his grandfather's life like vultures. It was around noon when a man stepped up to the table holding the military surplus items. The stranger stood out among the casual weekend garage sailors. He wore a neat tailored tweed jacket, despite the sweltering summer heat, and a pair of wire-rimmed spectacles perched on the bridge of a sharp, hawkish nose. He introduced himself briefly as Walter Higgins, a local collector. Walter's eyes darted over the rusted canteens and old belts before stopping dead on the brass compass. Liam watched as the older man reached out his hand, trembling almost imperceptibly as his fingers closed around the heavy metal casing. Walter picked it up. He didn't look at the cracked glass face. Instead, his thumb expertly traced the bottom edge of the casing, feeling for something. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second, a flash of pure, unadulterated shock that he quickly masked with a practiced cough. An interesting paperweight. Walter said, his voice surprisingly smooth, though Liam noticed the man's knuckles were white from gripping the compass so tightly. Broken, unfortunately. The gimbal is entirely shot. It belonged to my grandfather, Liam said, leaning forward. He was in Vietnam. Figured it might be worth something to a history buff. History, yes. Condition, no. Walter replied dismissively, pulling a leather wallet from his inner breast pocket. He didn't put the compass down. He held it against his chest almost protectively. I'll give you $20 for the novelty of it. Liam hesitated. He remembered the sheer weight of the thing. I was thinking more like 50. It's solid brass. Walter's jaw tightened. He pulled 2 crisp $20 bills from his wallet and laid them flat on the folding table. 40. Cash right now. It's genuinely all the broken thing is worth, kid. You'd be lucky to get 5 for it at a scrapyard. Liam stared at the money. $40 was 2 days of groceries. It was a drop in the bucket of his debt, but it was cash in hand. He nodded slowly. Deal. Walter Higgins didn't smile. He snatched his hand back, slipped the compass into the deep pocket of his tweed jacket, and turned away so fast his shoulder bumped into a passing neighbor. Liam watched him practically jog to a silver sedan parked down the street, the tires screeching slightly as the car pulled away from the curb. Liam folded the 2 $20 bills and slipped them into his pocket, feeling a fleeting sense of accomplishment. He had no idea he had just handed over the only thing that could save him. 3 days later, the smell of antiseptic and stale coffee still clung to Andre Patel's clothes as Liam helped him up the front steps of the Victorian house. The old veteran moved slowly, leaning heavily on a wooden cane, the left side of his face slightly slack from the stroke. Despite his physical frailty, Andre's pale blue eyes remained as sharp and piercing as they had been 50 years ago. Place looks different, Andre rasped his voice, sounding like dry leaves scraping across concrete. He paused on the porch, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the front lawn. The grass was trampled down in harsh rectangular patterns where the folding tables had stood. Liam swallowed hard, a lump of guilt forming in his throat. I had to clean up a bit, Grandpa. Get rid of some clutter. The hospital bills, they're bad. Andre didn't respond immediately. He shuffled through the front door, the rubber tip of his cane thudding against the hardwood floor. He walked past the living room, past the kitchen, and stopped dead at the base of the hallway stairs. He looked up. The ceiling panel leading to the attic was slightly ajar, the pull cord swaying gently in the draft. Andre's entire body tensed. The wooden cane trembled in his grip. He turned his head, slowly locking eyes with his grandson. Liam, did you go into the attic just to find some things to sell, Grandpa? Mostly old furniture, some broken tools. Did you open my green trunk? Andre's voice was suddenly a terrifying, booming baritone, completely stripped of the weakness of his recent stroke. It was the voice of a sergeant giving an order under heavy fire. Liam took a step back, genuinely frightened. I just took a few things. Nothing important. Just some old surplus junk. Andre dropped his cane. It clattered loudly against the floorboards. He grabbed Liam by the collar of his shirt, with surprising strength, his knuckles digging into Liam's collarbone. The brass compass, the heavy one with the cracked glass. Where is it? I sold it. Liam stammered, his heart hammering against his ribs. I sold it at the yard sale on Saturday, for $40. "Grandpa, you're hurting me." Andre let go, staggering backward, as if he had been shot in the chest. His hands flew to his face, his fingers digging into his own cheeks. A low, guttural sound escaped his throat, a sound of such profound agony and despair that it made Liam's blood run cold. Andre collapsed against the hallway wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor, his head buried in his hands, gasping for air. "Grandpa! Grandpa, are you okay? I'll call an ambulance." Liam panicked, reaching for his phone. "No!" Andre roared, swatting Liam's hand away. He looked up, his pale eyes brimming with tears, his face utterly drained of color. "You fool! You absolute, ignorant fool! Do you have any idea what you've done? It was just a broken compass," Liam pleaded, kneeling beside the old man. "It was heavy, it didn't even work. I needed the money for your medication." Andre let out a hollow, broken laugh that turned into a wet cough. "It wasn't a compass, Liam. It was a vault." Liam froze. "What?" Andre leaned his head back against the floral wallpaper, closing his eyes. The years seemed to crash down on him all at once, aging him a decade in a matter of seconds. November 1965, the Ayr Drang Valley. We were cut off, surrounded by NVA regulars. We were dying. My platoon leader, Lieutenant Harris, took shrapnel to the chest. He was bleeding out in the mud right next to me. Andre's voice dropped to a hoarse whisper, lost in the ghost of a memory. Before the war, Harris was an engineer. Brilliant man. Paranoid. He had his family's entire fortune liquidated before he deployed. He didn't trust banks. He didn't trust the government. He converted everything his family owned into something he could carry. Liam felt the room start to spin. What did he carry, Grandpa? He handed me his compass. Andre continued, tears tracking down his weathered cheeks. He showed me the trick. You press the bezel down, turn it counterclockwise, and the entire bottom casing unscrews. It was completely hollowed out, lined with velvet to stop the rattling. Andre opened his eyes and looked directly into Liam's soul. Harris made me promise to get it back to his pregnant wife in Chicago. If I couldn't find her, he told me to keep it, to use it, to build a life. I spent 3 years looking for her when I got back. She died in childbirth. The child was given up to the state, lost in the system. I tried, Liam. God knows I tried to find the heir. Grandpa. Liam whispered, his voice trembling violently. What was inside the compass? 6 flawless, unheated Burmese rubies. Andre said flatly the words, hanging in the air like a death sentence. Each one the size of a robin's egg. And a bearer bond from a Swiss bank wrapped in oilcloth worth $200,000 in 1965 money. I kept it hidden all these years. I was waiting for you to grow up, Liam. I was waiting for you to stop acting like a reckless child so I could give it to you. It was meant to pay off your debts. It was meant to buy this house. It was worth millions. The silence in the hallway was deafening. Liam couldn't breathe. The oxygen had been sucked entirely from the room. Millions of dollars. 6 flawless rubies. A Swiss bearer bond. All handed over to a stranger in a tweed jacket for 2 crumpled $20 bills. The man. Liam choked out his vision, blurring as panic seized his chest. The man who bought it. His name was Walter Higgins. He knew. Grandpa, I saw him touch the bottom of the compass. He didn't even look at the glass. He was feeling for the seam. He knew what it was. Andre's expression hardened, the sorrow suddenly burning away into cold, terrifying rage. The old soldier, who had just suffered a stroke, grabbed the banister and hauled himself to his feet. His hands were no longer shaking. A collector. Andre spat the word out like venom. Someone who knows the legend of Lieutenant Harris's missing rubies. The story circulated among veterans among the black market dealers for decades. They called it the Blood Compass. This Higgins bastard hunted it down. He hunted me down while I was in a hospital bed. Andre turned to Liam, his eyes burning with a dangerous, terrifying fire. Get your car keys, Liam. You sold my honor for $40. We are going to get it back, and God help Mr. Walter Higgins when we find him. Rain lashed against the cracked windshield of Liam's failing Honda Civic, the rhythmic squeak of the worn wiper blades, doing little to clear the deluge. Beside him, Andre Patel sat as rigid as a tombstone. The older man's breathing was shallow and ragged, a grim reminder of the stroke that had nearly killed him a week prior, but his left hand gripped the dashboard with white-knuckled intensity. Take the next exit toward Oak Brook, Andre commanded, his voice a gravelly rasp barely audible over the storm. He won't be hiding in a pawn shop. A man who knows about the Aya Drang compass deals in high-end antiquities. He's a broker. Liam swallowed hard, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. Grandpa, how do we even know where he is? All we have is a name. Walter Higgins. Andre reached into the breast pocket of his flannel shirt and pulled out a crumpled, water-stained receipt. When you were busy panic-selling my life's history, I was checking the caller ID on the landline. You mentioned a man named Higgins. Before my stroke, a man named Walter Higgins called the house 3 times, left voicemails claiming he was a historian. I ignored them. I knew what he wanted. He didn't stumble onto your yard sale by accident, Liam. He was watching the house. He waited until I was hospitalized to make his move on a naive kid. Andre unfolded a printed sheet of paper he had forced Liam to print from the hospital's business center before they left. Higgins operates a private appraisal firm for ultra-wealthy clients. Higgins and Kensington Heritage Auctions. They have a private gallery in the warehouse district downtown. That's where he'll take it. He has to open it carefully to extract the stones and the bond without damaging the casing, or he risks destroying the provenance. The warehouse district was a graveyard of industrial brick buildings gentrified into high-security art storage and private galleries. Liam parked a block away from the address, the heavy rain instantly soaking them to the bone as they stepped out of the car. Andre refused Liam's arm, leaning heavily on his wooden cane, his jaw set in a line of absolute granite. He was no longer a frail patient. He was Sergeant Patel, and he was dropping back into the jungle. They approached a sleek, unmarked black door with a glowing keypad. Liam panicked, but Andre didn't hesitate. He raised his heavy wooden cane and smashed the heavy brass handle directly into the center of the glass security panel. Alarms immediately began to blare, a piercing wail that cut through the thunder. "Grandpa, are you insane? The police will be here in minutes," Liam yelled, backing away. "Let them come!" Andre growled, reaching through the shattered glass to twist the interior deadbolt. "By the time they get here, this will be over." Andre kicked the door open. They stepped into a brightly lit, climate-controlled gallery filled with glass display cases holding antique flintlock pistols, ancient coins, and medieval armor. But Andre ignored it all, his eyes fixed on a heavy oak door at the back of the room. A light shone from beneath the crack. Andre marched across the polished concrete floor and threw his weight against the oak door, bursting into a private workshop. There, sitting behind a velvet-lined jeweler's desk, was Walter Higgins. He had discarded his tweed jacket and rolled up his sleeves. Pinned beneath a high-intensity magnifying lamp was the heavy brass compass. Walter held a specialized micro-torch in one hand and a set of jeweler's pliers in the other, desperately trying to heat the seized brass threads of the bottom casing to unscrew it. Walter jumped up, knocking over a tray of precision screwdrivers. His eyes widened in genuine terror as he saw the towering, soaked figure of Andre Patel filling the doorway, backed by a terrified Liam. Patel! Walter breathed, taking a step back until he hit the wall. You're supposed to be in intensive care. You made a tactical error, Higgins, Andre said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, deadly calm. He stepped into the room, the rubber tip of his cane squeaking against the linoleum. You left a survivor. It was a legal transaction, Walter shouted, his voice cracking. He pointed a trembling finger at Liam. I paid him. The boy accepted the money, it's mine. You defrauded a desperate kid to steal a dead man's legacy. Andre snarled, closing the distance. He raised his cane, pointing the brass tip directly at Walter's chest. Step away from the desk. Step away from Lieutenant Harris's compass. Or so help me God, I will beat you within an inch of your miserable life before the sirens get here. Walter didn't move away. Instead, a bizarre transformation came over him. The fear vanished from his eyes, replaced by a desperate, burning defiance. He lunged forward, grabbing the heavy brass compass with both hands, clutching it to his chest, just as he had done on Liam's front lawn. You have no right to it, Walter screamed, tears suddenly springing to his eyes. You stole it. You kept it locked in an attic for 50 years while my mother starved. Andre stopped dead. The cane wavered in his hand, the anger drained from his face, replaced by a sudden, terrifying confusion. What? What did you say? Walter was breathing heavily, his chest heaving as he clutched the tarnished brass. You think I'm just some greedy collector? You think I spent 20 years hunting you down just for a payday? Walter reached into his back pocket and pulled out a worn, laminated photograph, throwing it onto the jeweler's desk. Liam cautiously stepped forward and looked at the photo. It was a black-and-white picture of a handsome young man in a U.S. Army dress uniform standing next to a smiling, heavily pregnant woman. My name isn't Walter Higgins, the man said, his voice breaking. I was adopted when I was 4 years old. My birth mother died of pneumonia in a charity ward in Chicago in 1968. She died penniless because she spent every dime she had hiring private investigators to find the man who served with her husband. The man who supposedly had his final effects. Andre's cane slipped from his grasp, clattering loudly against the floor. His knees buckled, and he barely managed to catch himself on the edge of the heavy desk. His pale blue eyes were wide with a devastating, crushing realization. Your name, Andre whispered, his voice trembling violently. Your given name. Was it David? Walter David Harris wiped a tear from his cheek. Yes, David Harris, son of First Lieutenant Jonathan Harris. The silence in the workshop was absolute, broken only by the distant wailing sirens of approaching police cars. Liam stood frozen, his mind struggling to process the impossible collision of past and present happening before his eyes. Andre Patel, the stoic, unbreakable veteran, collapsed into a rolling office chair, burying his face in his large, scarred hands. He began to weep. It wasn't the quiet, dignified crying of an old man. It was the raw, agonizing sobbing of a soldier who had carried a 50-year burden of guilt only to find the ghost he had been searching for standing in front of him. I tried. Andre choked out the words, muffled by his hands. David. God Almighty, I tried. When I got back in '68, the world was upside down. The address John gave me was a boarded-up tenement. The neighbors said your mother had been evicted. I spent the ruby's intended value in private detectives over the next 5 years, trying to find the orphanage you were sent to. But the records burned in a county fire. You were just gone. David stood clutching the compass, his knuckles white. The hostility in his posture began to slowly melt, replaced by the crushing weight of a lifetime of unanswered questions. She told me stories, David said softly, before she got too sick. She said my father was a hero. She said he made sure we would be taken care of. When she died, I went into the foster system. I changed my name. I built this business from nothing. But I never stopped looking for the man who was with my father when he died. Andre slowly lowered his hands, looking up at the man who was a mirror image of the lieutenant he had bled beside in the mud of the Aya Drang Valley. He loved you, David. His last words weren't about the war. They were about the baby he was never going to hold. He made me swear on my life to give you that compass. David looked down at the heavy brass instrument in his hands. He walked over to the jeweler's desk. He picked up the specialized micro-torch and turned it on, adjusting the blue flame. Carefully, deliberately, he heated the bottom rim of the compass for exactly 30 seconds. Then he set the torch down, picked up a thick leather cloth, gripped the bottom casing, and twisted sharply. With a harsh grinding crack of breaking 50-year-old oxidation, the bottom of the compass gave way. David unscrewed the heavy brass cap. Inside, resting on a bed of decaying crimson velvet, were 6 stones. They weren't polished and cut like mall jewelry. They were raw, uncut Burmese rubies, deep and dark as arterial blood, catching the harsh workshop light, with a mesmerizing internal fire. Tucked beneath the velvet was a tightly folded square of oiled canvas. David pulled the canvas out and unfolded it with trembling fingers. It was a Swiss bearer bond, remarkably preserved, issued to Jonathan Harris. "It's real," David whispered, his voice full of awe. The legend was real. The flashing red and blue lights of police cruisers suddenly illuminated the frosted glass windows of the workshop. The sirens cut off, replaced by the sound of slamming car doors and shouting voices outside. Liam panicked. "Grandpa, the cops, we broke in." David looked at the broken glass in the hallway, then at Andre, and finally at Liam. He calmly folded the bearer bond, placed it back into the compass casing, along with the rubies, and screwed the cap back on. He placed the heavy compass into the center of the desk. "There is no break-in," David said loudly, his voice steady and authoritative. He walked over to a secure wall. Safe spun the dial and pulled out a thick stack of banded $100 bills. He walked over to Liam and pressed the money into the young man's chest. "What is this?" Liam asked, stunned. "That is $50,000 in cash," David said, his eyes locking with Liam's. "Consider it a consultant's fee for bringing a highly sought-after antique to my attention. That will pay off your grandfather's hospital bills. That will save your house. You take care of him, Liam. He carried my father's memory for half a century." "But the rubies," Liam stammered. "The bond. They're worth millions. Grandpa wanted me to have them to fix my mistakes." Andre reached out and placed a heavy, weathered hand on Liam's shoulder. "No, Liam. I wanted you to have them because I thought the rightful heir was dead. I was wrong. Those stones belong to David. They always have. I finally completed my mission." The heavy oak door was pushed open, and 3 police officers rushed in with their hands on their holstered weapons. "Nobody move hands where we can see them," the lead officer shouted. David stepped forward, holding his hands up peacefully, a calm smile on his face. "Officers, there's no problem here. I apologize for the confusion. Mr. Patel is an old family friend. He had a medical episode and stumbled into the glass door on his way in to see me. I've already called my insurance company. We were just concluding our business." The officers looked confused, glancing at the shattered glass, the soaked old man, and the bewildered young kid. But David Harris, known to them as Walter Higgins, was a pillar of the community, a wealthy and respected business owner. His word carried weight. After taking a brief report and ensuring no one needed medical attention, The police filed out of the gallery, leaving the three men alone in the quiet workshop. Andre stood up, leaning on his cane. He looked at David, 50 years of sorrow finally lifting from his shoulders. He stood taller than Liam had ever seen him. Andre didn't offer his hand to shake. Instead, he snapped his heels together and delivered a crisp, perfect military salute to the son of his fallen commanding officer. David's eyes filled with tears again. He straightened his posture and clumsily but earnestly returned the salute. As Liam drove his grandfather home through the clearing, rain, the thick stack of cash resting heavily in the glove compartment, the silence in the car was no longer suffocating. It was peaceful. Liam realized that in his desperate attempt to sell off the past, he hadn't just saved their house. He had inadvertently allowed his grandfather to finally come home from the war. Did this unbelievable story of a grandfather's secret past, a priceless hidden treasure, and a shocking family reunion keep you on the edge of your seat? The history we hide in our attics can sometimes hold the power to change lives forever. If you loved this incredible real-life mystery, please hit that like button, share this video with a friend who loves history, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling, true-life dramatic stories every single week.